Thank you very much. My publisher's name is Geffen, which is spelled G-E-F-E-N, and the headquarters are in Jerusalem. And when I finished the manuscript of this book, I sent it to Alan Dershowitz, hoping that he'd give a brief comment my publisher could use. Instead of which he wrote a complete preface, and part of it was that he was shocked having read my book because he believed he was widely read in American history and Jewish history, and yet he found so much in this book that he had no idea about before. Incidentally, he's writing his autobiography at the moment, which should be fascinating. I'll be using my notes a lot because I want to make sure I get the facts absolutely right, and I will be leaving the notes behind afterwards so anybody who's interested can check up on it. Israel's founding fathers, Moses and Joshua, his second in command, inspired America's founding fathers to a remarkable degree. Like most Americans, having been brought up on the Bible, they were familiar with the history of the Jews, especially their escape from Egypt to freedom in a land of their own. And they saw their own history as remarkably like that of the Jews to an extraordinary extent. They compared their enemy, the British King George III, to the enemy of the Jews, Pharaoh. They compared their leader, George Washington, to Moses, and they even saw a parallel between the Atlantic Ocean and the Red Sea. Both bodies of water were a problem, but they were also a pathway to freedom. Finally, they compared their 13 colonies with the 12 Jewish tribes that eventually united and flourished. It's not surprising that when they had to choose the Great Seal, which was to be on all official government documents in the future, that Thomas Jefferson should choose a theme straight out of the Bible. He suggested Moses leading the children of Israel through the wilderness on the way to the Promised Land. Benjamin Franklin also proposed a scene from Exodus, Moses parting the Red Sea and Pharaoh being enveloped by the waves. Instead, as you know, the selection committee chose the bald eagle for the Great Seal. However, the Liberty Bell became the symbol of the American Revolution, and with it a quotation from the Bible, Leviticus in fact, proclaim liberty throughout all the land and to all the inhabitants thereof. In 1917, during World War I, the British government, in its famous Balfour Declaration, expressed support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The then contemporary American president, Woodrow Wilson, also supported the declaration. So has every president since that time. These I describe in the book as Zionists, were Zionists in the original meaning of the word, that they were in favor of a safe and secure Jewish homeland in Palestine. And since 1948, in Israel itself, in fact, these Zionists were also supporters of the Balfour Declaration. This book explains in detail both how and why they consciously followed the pro-Jewish, pro-Israel policies, and how the Bible had such a powerful influence on their critical thinking and decisions. Here then are a few extracts from the book in which I focus on 14 of the 44 presidents. That does not mean that the other 30 are not equally fascinating. Washington. One of my many surprises in working on this book is how historians of the American Revolution and biographers of Washington failed to recognize the importance of a Jew named Chaim Solomon to the very existence of America. He is either ignored or dumped in a footnote. Yet, the fact is, he was vital to the success of the American Revolution. Without Solomon, it is conceivable that America would still be a British colony. It is almost certain, without him, Washington would have lost the war. What's the evidence for this? Incidentally, I'll leave all these notes behind for anybody who wants to check up on them. To set the scene, Washington had lost 2 recent battles to the British. A quarter of his 20,000 troops had died of disease or exposure to the bitter winter in which some of them had to walk bare feet in the snow. About 1,000 who had not been paid in over a year mutinied until 2 of their leaders were shot on the spot. Others were leaving in droves. Washington was also desperately short of arms and equipment, which several European countries were secretly willing to sell him, but he hadn't the money to pay for them. That's when Chaim Solomon, a Jewish immigrant from Poland, came to the rescue, provided the money for the arms and equipment. Washington then attacked the British at Yorktown and won the war. Solomon was not only vital to America's existence, but also to its survival. In its early days, it faced bankruptcy. Again, Solomon came to the rescue. Yet, as I said, Chaim Solomon is missing from most books on American history or merely a footnote. How is he celebrated otherwise? There is a statue of him in Chicago standing next to President Washington. A U.S. stamp bears his name, and a U.S. postage stamp was issued with his portrait on it. As for the man himself, he gave loans at below the prevailing rates and died a pauper. Excuse me. Oh, yeah, I have some more. I have some of my own, as a matter of fact. Yeah. Maybe no better, of course. As for President Washington, he set the tone in his relationship with Jews, which most future presidents adopted, when he assured a Rhode Island synagogue congregation that bigotry would not be tolerated in America. That congregation, apparently in Rhode Island, which was one of the earliest synagogues, reads this letter every year at the time he sent it. President John Adams, the second president, greatly admired both the Jews he knew personally and the Jewish warriors and prophets he had read about in the Bible. This doubtless explains why he was a Zionist, and a militant one at that. In 1880, 90 years, that's almost a century before Theodor Herzl launched the World Zionist Organization, Adams spelled out his own Zionist views. In response to a letter from a prominent American Jew, Mordecai Noah, who wanted to create a promised land for the Jews in America, Adams wrote, quote, "I could wish it in my heart that you had been at the head of 100,000 Israelites and marching with them into Judea and making a conquest of the country and restoring your nation to the dominion of it. For I really wish the Jews again in Judea, an independent nation." Excuse me. No other American president has praised Jews more emphatically, memorably, and succinctly than John Adams. It took him just 12 words. Quote, "The Hebrews have done more to civilize man than any other nation." Quote. Martin Van Buren. He was actively involved in saving Jews from being massacred in Syria. The ordeal began in 1840 when an Italian priest and his servant were reported missing. Then somebody suggested they'd been murdered. Although there was no suspect, the cry went up, the Jews did it. The government then arrested and imprisoned most of the male Jewish population in Damascus, all the city's rabbis, Jewish grave diggers, and even young Jewish schoolboys. They then began